Real business, real people, real stories. Welcome to Real Business Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Benenati. Hello and welcome to episode 111. As a former executive and president of global business for TwinLab, a publicly traded company, Chris Thompson cracked the code to achieving the highest level of business success while building and maintaining an exclusive level of fitness. While Chris served in his hectic corporate role, fitness, health, and wellness remained a necessary focus and constant. At almost 52 years young and maintaining year-round single-digit body fat with his hot, fast 24 principles, Chris is now focused and devoted to teaching his secrets to success with others. Are you ready to learn some of his secrets? Let's listen. Chris Thompson, welcome.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to be here.
It's incredible. We have spoken about 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And our conversations are for hours. I mean, we would have recorded about 3 episodes already.
Since I got here, we recorded an episode that we didn't hit record on.
It took us about an hour to get to get going here.
I apologize. Cut me off at any time. I can get going.
So, Chris, tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I've spent, I think, the part that most people kind of resonate around and gravitate to is I spent 30 plus years in the fitness, health, and wellness space. I started out actually in that space. I started out as a young athlete, right? And that got me interested in training and fitness and so forth. Got into modeling for a bit. Taking care of my body was kind of the focus around that, right? Unfortunately, I'm not 6'3", so that had a shelf life that wasn't going to be as long. But what I learned out of that was what I had control over was I could control my body and I could take care of that and make it the best I could. And I always enjoyed that, that challenge, right? And that work commitment to try to do it and learn. So it was a good vehicle for me. I got into the restaurant business for a while and some other things, liquor business with House of Seagram. And it really, over time, revealed to me that those were not my passions. And passion to me is really, I always refer to it as passion is the difference between I have to do something and I get to do something.
And I enjoy doing it.
Yeah, I get to, right?
So you found your passion at what age?
Well, I'm still finding my passions, right?
Oh, we always do.
But,
we always grow.
Yeah, I would say around that, which kind of set the direction, as it went into fitness, health, and wellness. I think I was 20. I was 26 years old.
And that's early because it's we usually don't find our passion until, usually 40s. I think.
Well, I'll tell you a quick funny story about it. So I was 25, 26. I was in the restaurant business and I was playing in a band. I play guitar and playing in a band.
So you're a musician?
Yeah, I am.
All right.
Yeah, and that's a central part of my life as well. But so around that, lead singer of the band and I, one of my closest friends, we took off. Actually, it's 25 years ago right now, 1995, he and I took off for a couple months and rode Harleys cross country. Went to Los Angeles, stayed out there with some musician friends. Just kind of meandered the whole, country, right?
Did you make it out to Sturgis?
We didn't go to Sturgis. Actually, the very first day, we rode from my home in Winter Park to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina to go to Myrtle Beach Bike Week. And that's where we started. It's a long haul, if you don't know, from Florida to South Carolina on a motorcycle.
It is.
It was a pretty harrowing first day, but with many days to follow. But then we just meandered our way out west and got to Los Angeles, and we were out there for a bit and, then brought it back. The point was my whole rationale for doing this, the desire to do this was, man, I'm going to go figure out life right now, right? Nothing like riding a Harley for, Harleys weren't really the in thing in 1995 either, right?
No.
They were just starting to become that kind of, you didn't have all the doctors and lawyers and people with money that were getting into it. It was just kind of starting about that time, I guess. And so it was really about like finding, passion is what I would say. I hadn't identified it yet at that time, but it was about, I want to go find my passion. Like, what is it? What is this purpose? I've still been honing that, like I said, for 25 years. And as you said, we all do, right? And hopefully continually recreating ourselves. But I got back at the end of that and man, that's a whole nother podcast, just the stories around that thing that we could do another time. That's crazy. But got back from that, and I was like, cool, man, like life is just going to be different now. And it was. I had no money. I was completely out of money. You know, I had a $20,000 motorcycle. What are you doing with that with no money, right? You know, and I was like, I got to get a job. I got to do something. And I started to work for House of Seagram in the liquor business. And man, it just quickly uncovered that was not my passion, right? I mean, I think part of the lesson of life is figuring out what your passion is and what you want to do. A lot of times is figuring out what you don't want to do.
A process of elimination.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Like, okay, I'm gonna do this because there was a lot of money in it, right? And it's like, oh, cool, do that. And I just
you were chasing probably money.
Yeah, money, security, all these kinds of things,
right.
And it was a natural evolution coming from the restaurant world, right? You know, like, oh, okay, it's kind of the bar world off of that, and so it was a natural progression. It seemed to be. It just wasn't the progression that I knew was going to fulfill me over time. So, anyways, I just chucked it all in, and I started a gym and personal training business from scratch, and had nothing, and scrapped it up, and built it into something good. And ironically, while I was doing that, I had a client who happened to be a sales rep for TwinLab. And I remember asking her one day, I was like, what do you do? And she told me, and I said, that's a job? You can do that? Like, you can work for TwinLab? Because, you know, I was into fitness and you know, call it bodybuilding, you know, my version of it at that time. And I bought all the supplements, and TwinLab was the shit, man. That was the brand, right? And Rip Fuel and Gainers Fuel and Amino Fuel, and it went on and on and on. And so she hooked me up. I met them, and ended up meeting with the vice president of sales and got hired. And my I was married at the time. My wife at the time and I, we moved to Atlanta so I could start as a sales rep. So I literally started at the ground floor as a sales rep with TwinLab. And fast forwarding a bit, I left there in the mid-2000s as director of sports nutrition. And stayed in the space, right? So this was now my way of figuring out how to be. What happened to me in the personal training kind of component of it is I loved working with other people. I loved just the how it filled your soul when you helped somebody to improve themselves, right? Develop confidence, improve their health, you know, just even their appearance, whatever it was in that. That was really what I found looking back on it. That was the stickiness, right?
That was the essence of your passion.
Yeah. That fulfilling feeling, right? And so, you know, that becomes a thread that comes back to where I am today. But so I went through and I worked in that, you know, world.
How long were you with TwinLab? Yeah.
I've had two careers with TwinLab. The first career, I think, was about, I would guess about 8 years, if I recall, right? Something like that, 7 years.
So you started as a sales rep, and you worked your way up to?
Yeah, to director of sports nutrition.
And then you leave?
Yeah, I left, yeah.
What'd you do that time?
I went and took over another sports nutrition company, a small one, really small one. So I went from like the big kind of
top of the
corporate giant to kind of a small independent, if you will, that had some hits, but it was a changing landscape in terms of products. Ephedra was being banned. And
what was the reason for leaving?
Well, God, see, man, there's just so many things that unfold here. In 2000,
In short, was it corporate?
It was corporate, but it's also an interesting kind of fold too in it because, and how life weirdly can manifest itself, right? I remember as I was trying to start the personal training business and so forth, like I was working on my own personal game, and I got kind of exposed to Tony Robbins, right? And had his program and like the CDs, I bought that whole thing. Right. And I remember listening to it and going, wow, this is really powerful. Fast forward, I think it was like 2003, we filed bankruptcy at TwinLab to get out from some lawsuits around Ephedra days and all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. And the group that came in and bought it, one of the principals of that group happened to be Tony Robbins.
Wow.
And so, yeah. So
how was that?
Well, I didn't, it wasn't like day to day with Tony, but there were times that we worked with him. Like he would come. I remember doing a sales meeting. I think it's about 2004, maybe, in Park City, Utah, that Tony flew in for and did the whole thing, right?
His whole presentation, his whole...
a smaller version of it. We did, as a company, we went and did his whole thing in New Jersey. Like a 3-day, 20-hour
the weekend thing,
Yeah, I walked on fire, right. Did all that
breakthroughs
stuff.
And
it was interesting. It was cool. And so I kind of got with him a little bit on some of those things. I did a really kind of interesting... brought me up on stage for like an hour and did a thing into mindset, really. And I can remember the question. He had two of us up there. Later I was recognized as the top performer at TwinLab, but there was another sales rep who was struggling. And they put both of us up on stage together.
To compare?
And contrast. What's the difference, I think, right? And it got into mindset. And I can remember the questions because it's a good one to ask yourself sometimes, perhaps. And Tony says, he looks at me and he goes, life is. And he's waiting for me to answer.
Right?
Right, yeah, exactly. And he's waiting for my answer. And I think at my first one, if I recall, it's like 16 years ago, I said, fun, right? And he goes, life is. And he just kept doing it and kept doing it, right? He was trying to kind of peel that onion to get to, I guess, really what was my core, right? What was underneath there? Contrasting that with this guy who, unfortunately, in his career was struggling and not doing well in producing, it was pretty...
The opposite, the total opposite.
Yeah, life is... unfair,
sucks.
Yeah, right. Yeah, all those kinds of things. And I think, Tony was trying to unveil to anybody in there that really one of my favorite quotes is your attitude determines your altitude. And that was the difference. And, bringing it back kind of full circle so far, back to passion. I was passionate about what I was doing. I loved bodybuilding. I loved fitness. I loved being a part of that. I loved working with the athletes that we sponsored, some of the top pros, Lee Priest and Victor Martinez and Melvin Anthony and some of these other guys who I was really close friends with. I went to every show every weekend with them, and that was part of what my job was. I loved it. So when you ask me what life is, I'm like, fucking great, man. This is kind of my dream. I found my passion. I'm getting paid. I make money, and I'm enjoying it.
Let me ask you quickly on that. Was it that the other person, the other guy on stage with you, wasn't passionate about his job, even if he was making the money? Was he doing what he loved?
I don't know. But what I can say is he certainly wasn't doing his job with passion, right? So I don't know what his challenge was in life, but I'm guessing, right, that was his viewpoint on life. And this just happened to be a microcosm of the macrocosm of how what his essence was, what his vibration was, right? Like the guy where, things aren't going right. And that's what he's noticing. I'll give you, this is a great one to do too. This was a Tony Robbins one that I got. And it's this great exercise. And so I'll it starts by look around the room. And I want you to notice everything in this room right now that's brown. Take an inventory. All right, now close your eyes. And then you ask the person, what do you see that's blue? And they're sitting there and they're going, oh, shit, man, I know it's brown. I was looking at this brown, that brown.
Because that's what you were told to focus on.
Yeah, right? and maybe, this wall next to us right now is blue. So I probably know that one because it's so, but I missed all the nuances. And the point is this is Tony's line. He goes, stop looking for the shit in your life, which is the brown.
The brown.
Right? So you're looking for the things that aren't going right as opposed to the things that are going right. And so it's just kind of these confirmation, beliefs and biases that happen in our life. And as you said, what are you looking for?
What do you focus on?
Yeah, what are you focusing on?
Right.
Because that, that gets to my core belief into everything about like I wear it on my sleeve literally in tattoos, but, Buddha, and Buddha's quote was, what we think about, we bring about. Thoughts become things, right? And that's
I believe in that. Of course,
100%.
Absolutely.
And so I think that was kind of the difference really at the essence of what, this is all kind of part of my whole journey around, just my evolution and my growth that now I work with people, in this kind of space as well.
So you work for TwinLab 8 years, you leave, you start another company, and then you brought back to TwinLab when there was a restructure of corporate.
Yeah.
And the second round, you were there how long?
I was there, I think 5 years, round 2.
And you became vice president
So we had an overarching corporate company that I was executive vice president of, and then I was president of the global sports nutrition. Yeah.
And now you are CEO, founder of Crush One Nutrition
and Crush One Coaching,
and coaching. So you do coaching, and you have your website, crush1nutrition.com.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
That we have a product. We have products there. Meal replacement, right? Which is, I like to kind of think of it as give a man a fish, he has food for a day. teach man to fish, he has food for life. So giving the man the fish is the opportunity with Clean Meal, which was a product I made, which was just based around what my diet was, food sources and food amounts. It was something that I kind of got known for while I was president of TwinLab. I was also face of the brand of, as a kind of fitness athlete, filmed frequently with places like bodybuilding.com and other platforms. And so started kind of getting a voice really, beyond just the corporate side, but also a voice on kind of the front side on that, right, if you will. And that was kind of part of re-authenticating the brand, right? Is that the guy who's running it now, because they had kind of gotten away from sports, now as I came back, it was about re-authenticating it as to, hey, these are the real dudes, I guess what I wanted people to think is, wow, Chris and his team, they're one of us, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Live this same lifestyle, where training comes first, everything else kind of, fits in around it.
And being the face, at that time you were in your 40s, right? Mid 40s maybe?
Late 40s.
Late 40s?
Yeah.
And you were ripped. You're what, 180 pounds?
Well, that's kind of an interesting thing too, because it's about some of that paradigm shift, right? When I was like younger into training, I was like, man, you got to be at least over 200 pounds or you're not even, what are you, right?
That's a stereotype. Yeah, you have to be up there.
Yeah, and that was my own ego as you look back on it, it's like this number that I have to achieve to be something. What I found in myself, that I've honed over time, but when I got 200 pounds, man, I looked, whatever. I looked like a bigger guy or whatever, but nobody ever said anything to me. Like friends at the gym, like, man, you look awesome or anything.
Yeah, it didn't change.
I'd get down to 175. And I'd have friends like maybe 180, and I'd have buddies at the gym that I hadn't seen. And they're like, dude, man, you look awesome. How much you weigh? Like 205? I'm like, man, I weigh 178. And they're like, no way. I'm 205. You're bigger than I am.
You look bigger.
Ding. Yes. That's it. Right.
Visually, you look bigger because you trim your waist, your muscle.
Right.
They look.
I looked muscular at that point,
right.
And an athlete, as opposed to being this thing. So I was chasing the wrong stuff, right? I was like, I got to weigh this thing so that it satisfies kind of the norm of what people think you should be. And
again, the magazines and the bodybuilding world, and
well, you got to remember too, at the time I'm running around with some of the biggest guys on the planet. I saw last night, I watched Ronnie Coleman on Joe Rogan.
Yeah,
right?
I did see it. Yeah,
did you watch it?
Yeah,
it's great. Well, so I was all the Ronnie days, right? And so I was, those were my days, and I'm backstage at the shows.
Dorian Yates.
Dorian, I've had dinner with Dorian and Victor Martinez before, and with Ronnie and Melvin Anthony, who was one of my guys, and Victor was one of my guys as well, and a good friend, and that was the world I was running in. So in my head, I'm like, holy shit, I got to be this. I got to at least be 200 pounds. These guys are 300 and the biggest men in the world.
And you weren't feeling right at
No.
that weight. Your bone structure, your body structure is not to carry that weight.
Wasn't me.
Yeah.
That wasn't my, that's not me optimized at that point. But, that's ego, right? And it's that's a huge thread and part in my journey is about kind of understanding ego, releasing ego, right? Realize the role that it plays in life, be aware of it, and don't be run by it, right?
Yeah, now you live by health and wealth now. It's a combination, right, of how you feel, how you look.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's funny, as I always say. So now we mentioned, Crush One Coaching, that I also run, and I work with a really wide variety of types of people. Everything from I've had some pretty fun engagements and success as young as 17-year-old models, like big time models, to clients as old as 74. I work with a bunch of rock stars in there as well. I've worked with some really cool CEOs and head of private equity companies and other stuff. So really busy moms. I work with a bunch of them as well, and so it really runs the gamut because I brought a scientific kind of program together that really was something I honed when I had that job of being, the day-to-day of running, a busy company, a publicly traded company as TwinLab was, and in the role of president of Global Sports Nutrition and all the hats I had to wear in that. But at the same time, I had to maintain a shape, to be able to be the face of the brand. So I had to really condense and figure out how to make that work. So in that, I'm getting to your question about feel, because this is a really big part to me. But in that, I really honed my process, and I took the same principles that made me successful in business to bring them to fitness, which is, to me, it's pretty simple. It's productivity over activity. right? You know, a lot of people are like, oh, I went to the gym for an hour today. Well, that's activity.
Right.
How much productivity did you yield out of that?
Out of that 1 hour?
Right. Because I don't train for more than 30 minutes. And that's one of the things I get from people all the time is, oh, I'd look like you if I spent 4 hours a day in the gym. I'm like, man, I don't spend 4 hours a week in the gym. I don't have that kind of time.
You know what? It's funny you say that because I've changed my whole lifestyle in business, the way I do my business. I work for less hours now.
Yeah.
I probably work from 9 to 1, 10 to 1.
Yeah.
And I feel I'm more productive.
That's right.
Within those hours than working 9 to 5 or 6 or 7, you know,
Couldn't agree more.
Hours I used to do before.
Yeah.
And I'm much happier.
Yeah.
Why? Because now I have time, quality time with my family.
That's right.
I could go to the gym, do the things I love,
Yeah.
and I'm happy overall because I got my work done and I still have a life to live.
That's
right.
right.
So,
Balance, right?
Balance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, life is more than just that. And I find, you know, again, it goes back to kind of, you know, for me, it's like that 200-pound metaphor. You know, you're doing something because, quote unquote, you should, right? Like, hey, what is a work schedule? And you're an entrepreneur, right? You know, I mean, you don't work for somebody, and like results to you are the only thing that matter.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if I work 80 hours, 20 hours, as long as I meet the numbers.
Hey, honey, I can't pay the mortgage this month, but guess what? I worked 80 hours.
Right.
This week, you know, like, well, what good is that, right? That to me is that productivity or activity. I don't want to do something unless it's going to present
That's just exercise, what we call it.
Same thing,
Yeah.
right? So in that's kind of what I teach when I work with all these people is how to bring that into a very busy life. Because I think the hurdle for so many people is, man, I just don't have time to take care of myself. And it's like, you do if you do it right? You know, one of the things I say is most people work too hard at the wrong things for the results they desire. Right, which is that mindset. I got to go to the gym for 2 hours a day, and I got to do an hour of cardio.
I've seen people, you know, for years in the gym, and they look exactly the same. There's no change.
Most people.
Yeah, I would say
not judgmental or critical of them, but almost like
because they're doing it. They don't have a coach. They don't have someone, a mentor. They don't have a training partner. They just go in not knowing what they're doing.
What I would say is
that doesn't help.
They're not showing up and being present when they're there. Right, their awareness isn't there that I'm here right now.
Body and mind.
Mind-muscle connection, right?
Right,
you know, these kinds of things. But so you brought up feel, and that's a really important one to me because when I work with this broad range of people, we do like a weekly check-in and among other things, but I always have a weekly check-in where we track metrics. Everything's done through an online platform. So I work with people all around the country and world, frankly. And so I've got like data on them. And then each week we'll do kind of a check-in, you know, to see where we are and, you know, all kinds of stuff. We get into a lot more, almost far more mindset things, you know, after the first couple weeks, once you figure out X's and O's, then it's really kind of the rest of it.
Yeah, you do the scientific first and figure that out. And then it's all mindset after that.
Then it's the practical, right? Yeah. We can get into this as well, but the subconscious then starts to take over and get in the way and bump something up because this is the actual pattern of behavior that got somebody into the place that they were in. Mm-hmm. Now starts to reveal itself as we're trying to initiate a new set of behaviors, changing that kind of subconscious programming, right? You know, just going into it. But as part of that, the first question that I always ask every single time, you know, we get on the phone, if you were a client of mine, we get on the phone, Robert, how you feel? I just want to know how you feel. Because if you don't feel good, the rest of it doesn't make any difference. Right? And so what I find is that kind of like, you know, ultimately looking good becomes a byproduct of feeling good in a behavior that you can stick with is you can replicate consistently, right? And so once you bring that in, it's like that's what just becomes kind of the new way of doing things. And so that's what it is. And I always say the system that I've created is very simple. It's based around food sources, food amounts, and food timing. And that right there is 80% of results. You know, the saying, abs are made in the kitchen. Couldn't be more true. Yeah. You can't out-exercise a bad diet, right? So exercise training is I've really condensed it down as we talked about time to 13 exercise protocol that hits the whole body and it moves in a systematic, you know, process to do everything like help detoxify the body by moving lymph strategically through the body, you know, help stimulate hormones like growth hormone and testosterone by you know, just kind of in the movements and sequences using compound movements at the right times and so forth and condensing it into something that can be done. So what I say is I won't describe that as easy because any new behavioral change is never easy.
It's not easy, no.
But if you make it simple, which is what I think we've done.
And I think that's what you're done. I was gonna go there. You have simplified the system. You know, we always think, and anyone, you know, when a new resolution at the beginning, I got to go to the gym, right? And you're dreading it already because you're like, I got to wait. You know, lift weights, push this,
Yeah.
do that, sweat. I'm going to be aching.
Yeah.
And right,
Yeah.
now you're monkey minded.
That mindset. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
And then, but you've taken all that experience that you've done, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've actually learned all this,
Yeah.
right? You're teaching it, but you're actually living it, because the way you look at your age, you're
Almost 52.
almost 52, and you're at what, 10% fat?
Yeah, generally single digit body fat. I'm probably right around 10% at the moment.
And most likely that's commitment,
Mm-hmm.
number one,
Yeah.
and consistency on what you're doing, and that's between diet and exercise.
Yeah, 16 years I've eaten the same way, right? The food sources,
How long?
food amounts. 16 years, based on macros.
You know what? I spoke with. So we met through Rich Chalenza, a good friend of mine. He's
Yeah.
got his own podcast.
Awesome dude.
Yeah. And he invited us to meet up with some of his friends, Italian friends, right? So
Yes, we did.
I don't know, 7, 8 of us. We're
Yeah.
around this table. Food is coming from all over.
Big Italian. Everybody's Italian. Yeah,
Right?
doing the Italian
So
dinner.
and you just sit there and you were like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. You didn't touch. I don't know. You didn't have anything. I think
I drink water.
just water.
Yeah.
Right. I was like,
Yeah.
and we met for the first time.
Yeah.
I was like, man, this guy is committed
Yeah.
to his
Yeah.
to his lifestyle
Yeah.
and his diet, because he
Yeah.
did not let anyone
Yeah.
talk him into eating anything. So kudos to you for that. I mean, it's hard, like you said. It's not easy.
Yeah, I'd say it's not easy making that kind of transition, but like as I said, because I've made it the system simple, it's easy to follow, and because it's easy to follow with consistency, right? And it happens right away for most people. Like as you start to follow this, like even in the first week, most people are seeing and feeling, right? Back to that word, significant results in the first week. And so what happens is you go,
Because it's a
self-rewarding
shock,
at that point.
It's a shock to your body, so you feel it right away.
Yeah, I guess that's some of it, but it just gets into, so my protocol that I created is called Hot Fast 24. I wrote a book called Get Hot Fast, and Hot Fast is it's an acronym, and it stands for Hormone Optimization, Transformation, Fasting, and Systematic Training. So it's a 24-hour protocol of, like I said, food sources, food amounts, food timing, and a 13 exercise protocol to put that all together. So what do I mean by hormone optimization? Realistically, what we're doing is through these food sources, food amounts, and food timing, we're down-regulating fat storage hormones like insulin, right? I mean, that's the game right there. So down-regulating that fat storage hormone and helping to upregulate fat burning and muscle building hormones like testosterone and growth hormone. And that's just done through simple behaviors, right? I mean, we talked a little bit about like the exercise component of it, right? The 13 exercises and how they're designed to help move lymph through the body and help to increase testosterone and growth hormone through compound exercises and movements. But that's just kind of like the small part. I always say that's 20% of results. It's really that 80% of the food sources, amounts, and timing.
yeah.
But when you start to kind of get those, and we eat great tasting food, right? I mean, like the food is awesome. And so that's the most common thing is people like that. I get this all the time in the beginning, that first week, people say, I can't believe how much food I'm eating. And to me, back to feel, is everything is intuitive. So what I'm teaching people to do is actually learn to feel. Because what I find is that most people are eating most of the time, and this goes for all other behaviors as well, frankly, but they're eating not out of the feeling of hunger. One of the lines that I say is eat when you're hungry, drink when you're thirsty. We'll learn the difference, right? Between those. That's some of it is a lot of people think that they're hungry, misconstrue hunger for thirst, right? They're actually dehydrated. You can a lot of times tell by the food you're craving at that point. What I find is if you're craving something salty, and this isn't across the board for everything all the time, but if you're craving something salty, a lot of times it's actually a sign of dehydration. It's your body trying to get water. Right? So the salt is going to make you thirsty, going to make you drink. Actually, it also helps to...
It's a sign to tell you got to drink water.
Yeah, right?
Oh, wow.
And so, but that feeling, right, that gut feeling, if you will, is, man, I feel that. But it's actually, you drink a glass of water, I'm not hungry anymore. What was that? That's really what that was a lot of times. So what I'm trying to do with people through this system is teach them how to really get in tune with their body.
Yeah, because we eat on time. I mean,
well, that's the other one.
We wake up, it's
right.
breakfast. 12 is lunch. 5 is 6 o'clock is dinner, and we eat sometimes, and we're not even hungry.
That's not intuitive, exactly. So what I say is that most people are eating out of habit, which I would contend is what you just described perfectly. It's 12 noon. Let's go to lunch, right? Is my body hungry? Do I need to feed it right now? I'm just kind of reacting to the really to
the norm, to the way we're
and it's hard for a lot of people, right? You work in an office, that's your lunch hour. So what are you going to eat otherwise, right? But with that said, I try to tune people into eat when there are some parameters around it in food timing, but once we get into it, it's eat. There's a parameter in what they eat per se, right? We only eat incomplete meals, right? No snacking and things like that. As a mitigation to insulin, right? Because most people are triggering insulin way too frequently throughout the day, and they create insulin resistance.
That's what snacks do.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Anything does, right? Drinks as well. Anything that has a caloric value is going to trigger an insulin response, right? Around that, and then so by doing that too frequently, that's what leads to what's called insulin resistance. Insulin resistance over time becomes pre-diabetes. Pre-diabetes over time becomes diabetes, and that's how you have 70 million people walking around in the United States, who are diabetic. And if, connecting it to COVID-19, all of that was based around comorbidities, right? And in that, one of the top comorbidities was diabetes. Diabetes is, for the most part, I know probably have some people, one of my business partners, a type 1 diabetic, right? He requires insulin, on a daily basis. But he's been through the program. That's kind of how we started working together as well. And he never had more stable blood sugar than when he followed the program. He's not, but I've worked with countless people that no longer require metformin, insulin, all kinds of, whatever their diabetic medications. Obviously, that's between them and their doctor, right? I don't don't step into that when they say, "Hey,
you don't want to be held responsible."
Yeah, I'm not. And I don't pretend to be. I'm not a physician, but and give you just a real quick example is I recently worked with a gentleman, 65 years old. He had a fasting blood glucose of 155, which is, high. Yeah. And he used metformin a couple times a day as part of his, protocol, right, for health. We started together because he was experiencing neuropathy in his feet, which is not pleasant and happens with diabetics, right? And so before he did a stem cell treatment, he decided to try to work with me. His son works with me. His son happens to be a rock star that I work with, and so he's like, "Man, you should try work with Chris in this." Anyways, we started at 155 fasting blood glucose, and in 3 weeks he was under 100. He's like, I don't think I need this anymore. It's like, you need to call your doctor, right? I'm not the should I keep taking my metformin? I'm like, that you speak with your doctor on that. But his doctor said you really don't, because he made the lifestyle behavioral change.
Was it exercise or diet or both?
Diet.
I
mean, it's both. It certainly is. But the biggest thing was he just didn't know how to eat food sources, food amounts, and food timing that would become his friend to mitigate.
Work with him, not against him.
That's exactly right. So it's about optimizing hormones around that. And then the other part is reducing inflammation. That's such a big part too, right? Food timing and food sources and food amounts play a big role in that. So that's kind of my first phase and first step, right? Is as you get this, we're also reducing inflammation. I think about the role that inflammation, first of all, most disease in the body can be traced to inflammation, right? So when we're eating the wrong food sources, the wrong amounts, the wrong timing. So what are we talking? We're talking processed sugars. We're talking sugars, processed foods, things that are difficult for the body, that are not natural for the body to break down. That's creating a gut inflammation. So I find this a fascinating thing that I share with a lot of people, talking about feeling, right? And tapping into how we feel. Is that serotonin, the neurotransmitter that is makes us feel good and love and so forth. It happens to be what's produced by ecstasy, Molly, MDMA, whatever you want to call it, right? That people take and they're out of their mind, like, I love everybody,
I'm
right?
Happy, right?
Yeah, it couldn't be, like, you're a stranger and I love you, right? Which is, it's great, you're not going to keep that, long term. But so that's a synthetic method of getting to that. But that's a neurotransmitter that's naturally occurring in our body. What's interesting is that 90% of serotonin actually resides in the gut. in the intestines. So what happens when you're eating? Now, it passes through the vagus nerve to the brain where we get that. But what happens when you've got a bad gut biome because it's all inflamed from eating these poor sources and amounts and timing, and it plays a role on serotonin. So as we start to reduce that inflammation, not only do you feel better physically, right? I've worked with a lot of people that say, hey, my knee doesn't hurt me anymore. You think that could have something to do with it? And if you're carrying less weight, if reducing inflammation, all those things can play a role in it, for sure. Of course, yeah. But once we break free of that and people just start to notice that they feel better and think better thoughts, right? It's crazy how it happens, but almost everybody talks about it. And frankly, back to your story of when we met at dinner, the reason why I don't, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with Italian food. I'm saying that for me, how my body responds, right, to things like pastas and other things like that, is I will create an inflammation in my body. And what I notice from that is after I've done something like that, and I still do, occasionally I'll drink alcohol or eat foods that are not, quote unquote on my program. What I notice is it's not just how I feel the next day, but how I think. I notice a difference in my thoughts, that my thoughts... and
fogginess or...
Well, I wouldn't call it fogginess as much as productive versus unproductive thoughts. I'm a very... I guess you could call it an optimistic guy, right? I once got asked by somebody, hey, are you a glass half full or a glass half empty guy? And I said, man, I'm a guy, you give me a glass, I'll find a way to fill it up. Just give me a glass, right? So maybe that's kind of like an uber optimist, if you will. But so my thoughts tend to be, when I'm in my right mind, if you will, no pun intended, very positive, right? Even if something goes wrong, it's like, oh, this is an opportunity to
learn, find, and change, and
exactly,
pivot.
Or hone. Right. Yeah, exactly. I love pivot. That's a great word. What I will find is that if I do something that takes me off of my game in that, of the things that I mentioned, my thoughts would start going to, oh shit, what could go wrong with this? Right? I would call it more fear-based, right? Like, is that deal going to close today? What if it doesn't? I haven't heard from them in 3 hours.
You start doubting, the fear sets in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the part that, to me in my life at this point, that's just not worth it. So for me to sit at a dinner, and I'm not suggesting that, that delicious food would have done this to me, but I know I've honed a program, and I know what it will do to me, to those thoughts among everything else. It happens to be how I keep my, girlish figure, right? But which once upon a time was the motivator driven by ego, right? Like I felt the need to look a certain way. But what keeps me in the zone today, I like looking a certain way, that's great. But really what keeps me there is my ability to be so much more productive, successful, have that mindset to help other people. If I'm feeling shitty in my life,
how can you help?
Yeah. Right. I gotta be there to be able to help teach it. And there's nothing more rewarding to me finding my passion than when you help people make breakthroughs. The story I told you about the gentleman that no longer required metformin, and when they write me a letter at the end of our engagement about how it not only changed their life but saved their life, that's some stuff that's pretty powerful to me.
That's
like
rewarding.
That's what tells me. That's what I would say feeds my soul, and that's the one that keeps
that's your drive.
Going. Yeah. I mean, I'm like everybody else. I like being successful and making money and things that you can get off of that kind of stuff.
But it will come.
Yeah. But I think what I came up with is that if I'm trying to get things, right, material possessions for validation, right, from other people, like, oh, cool car, man, or whatever it is, it's a nice watch. That's a place of ego. I like to do it really just come from a place for me, because I do like nice things, but for me, it's more about celebration.
A reward, yeah.
Yeah, it's my celebration of I helped a lot of people, and the byproduct of helping those people were monetary rewards that now I can celebrate. And, I've bought watches in my life that remind me of a, no pun intended, time. That's, I achieved something, TwinLab, as I became director of sports nutrition, as I became president. There were little celebrations that I had within myself.
It's self-rewarding, and it's not to show off or show other people your achievements. It's not about that.
So to me, that's not for validation, right? Like, oh, you're okay, right? That's ego, but it's for my celebration, just as you described it. And a reminder, right? When I look to see what time it is, I go, oh, yeah. What? I've achieved dreams.
Yeah. And you look back and you say, okay, this is what I've... Yeah, this is my journey.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Chris, you're physically fit, and people would probably categorize you as, a gym rat or Jeff, but you're actually a smart guy. We've had
I don't know about that, but
deep conversations.
Yeah.
You've well-rounded guy. Now, we went through all the nutrition side and stuff.
Yeah.
I want to get a little bit into your head. Okay, so. I always ask, are you happy? But obviously you are. I don't even have to ask that one about you. But if there was something you would change about yourself, what would it be?
Wow. That's a good one. Well, I'm going to start with one thing that you said is that, I would certainly describe myself as happy. Mm-hmm. What I strive for more than happiness is joy. Because happiness is, frankly, for most, transitory.
It's a moment. It's a wave. Yeah. Contentment is a little more flat, and that's where that's my difference. I agree with you.
And I think joy, right?
Yeah, joy is flat, and you want to be joy. It doesn't matter if from scale 1 to 10 you're a 3 or a 7, but as long as it's flat and across the board, it's more important than happiness, which is a wave.
So I will answer your question. I'm kind of maybe half stalling for time trying to think of an answer, right, of what I changed myself. But for real, I think that there's value in this because I think it's something interesting is kind of a metaphor that I have with people is be a thermostat, not a thermometer.
Be a thermostat, not a thermometer.
So to that happiness, right? Yeah. So what does a thermometer do? Let's start with that. A thermometer is simply taking a reading of of an external circumstance. So if it's 75 degrees in here,
it'll tell you
it's 75 degrees. But if it becomes 80 degrees in here, the thermometer is going to be 80 degrees, and becomes 20 degrees, it's going to tell you, it's going to read 20 degrees. It's reacting to its surroundings, and it's being dictated, and it's becoming what its surroundings
is.
Correct. What does a thermostat do? Is it creates its environment.
It adjusts.
You set that at 78 degrees, and over time, right, it's going to use heat or cool to create an environment that's 78 degrees. It's not reacting, it's creating. And so I try to
love
live.
That, yeah.
So I try to live through life and help teach as part of my protocol as well, is to have that mindset. And so, it's real easy in theory. Sometimes it's not so simple, right? So you sometimes things happen in life that are jarring, right? And it's that's a tough time to say, hey, something just went really not the way I desired it to go in my life, but frankly, I'm okay, right? Like I have to be okay. That to me is the game. When you start to get to that, and that's some of, you talked about kind of like being level, I guess, right? Is
balance. I mean,
but I mean within that is to when you really, this gets into ego and getting self-love, which I think is the answer to everything, frankly, right? That's that journey, because when you truly do peel that onion and get to self-love, then it is, I know at my core, I'm okay, I'm enough. Right? Not great, whatever that is. I'm just as not my body or anything else, but just as a human being, which we all are, frankly, but that's part of the hide and seek journey that we have to get there and get to it. Irrespective of what happens to me, that doesn't change who I am and my self-love. So what I try to do when something goes the way I don't want it to is, and you said this with pivot, which I really like, is where's my opportunity here? And I can share a quick story. I remember getting a flat tire not that long ago. I guess about a year ago. I got a flat tire, and my car doesn't happen to have a spare tire, right? So it was I was downtown Orlando, as a matter of fact, which I rarely am. I got a flat tire on Orange Avenue, and what's it, Orange? I forget whichever one that is. But I'm sitting there on the side of the road, and I'm like, and it's getting ready to rain. And I was like, holy shit, right? Flat tire, getting ready to rain. I don't have spare. Oh, it was on Sunday if I didn't mention that. So I got to get a tow truck, all these kinds of things. I have to get my car towed out to all these. And I remember saying to myself, so this is where I kind of use my self-talk, back to why I like to try to keep myself in the right mindset so that I can have the awareness and mindfulness to do this when it's presented with me. Man, I don't know how. Somehow I'm going to make this great. I don't know what it's going to be. And I sat on the side of the road for like 3 hours waiting for 2 tow trucks came. The first one came and was incapable of taking my car. We had to wait for a flatbed. I remember sitting there, homeless gal came up to me. I turned out I was across the street from a mission. And I was like, so now this woman's approaching me that is not what any of us normally would think of. I'm like, man, I want to go sit down and talk with her. And I was like, here's your opportunity. And I sat down and talked with her. Like, I had no place to go. She was a heroin addict, you know. I mean, she had kind of a tough life. She was waiting for the mission to open up so she could get some food and sleep there. And so here I am going, oh, my fancy car here with a flat tire that has to be, you know, like, now I wasn't feeling sorry for myself. So I was in like a good mindset ahead of time, but boy, did life and circumstance present to me a moment there.
You don't have issues, man.
Yeah. Right. And I sat with her and I talked with her and she thanked me for talking to her. She's like, nobody talks to me. Right. You know, there was a security guard that came by and I became friends with him and talked to him. And so I just tried to sit in that space of like, I can't control any of this. I have zero control. Right. How can I make the best of it? That was my attempt at being a thermostat, not being a thermometer.
Great story. So what would you improve about yourself? You never answered.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I certainly wish, you know, in a way that I were able to get to this space a long time ago, right? Yeah. You know, I mean, it's not that there isn't plenty to improve upon in my life, you know, and in my physique, in my relationships, everything else. But I will say this: I'm in a really what I would call special time for me in evolving relationships that are important to me in my life, with family, with friends, with others. Really, you know, I've been on a pretty deep ego awareness dive for a while. I've done plant medicines as part of that, ayahuasca and psilocybin mushrooms and meditations and
you worked on
hypnotherapy. Yeah. I didn't get here by accident. I got here through, and I wasn't even coming from a bad place, but I just kind of wanted to be at this higher level.
How can you get better? Yeah. Be a better Chris.
A better me. Yeah. So what would I improve upon myself? I guess I would just, I hope, speaking to my inner self, that I keep this journey going and keep improving upon myself, taking the things that I learn. That's my mission today, is how can I take the things that I've learned and just share those with others to help try to, you know, help them improve their lives and break through some of these things.
It would be very selfish to learn all this and leave life and not have shared it.
You brought me to one of my favorite quotes, Maya Angelou. Yeah. When you learn, teach. When you get, give. And that's the space I sit in life right now.
Yeah. What do you fear?
This is going to sound esoteric. I fear, right? So fear.
You fear of being fearful.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is, I think, you know, fear is really the impediment to anything that we want to achieve, right? I love this saying, is that fear is the absence of love, and love is the absence of fear. So when it comes to fear, you know, the underlying fear that I think most of us is, how will I be perceived if I do this and it's not this podcast, right? You know, I mean, there's always that inkling of, I don't know, what if I sound like an idiot? You know, what if this, what if that? And maybe I do, but I'm okay with it at this point. You know, I'm just trying to kind of share who I am and where I am, be authentic in what that is. And so my fear is getting trapped in the place of holding myself back, because of my feeling at a core, like most people have, of not being enough, and the fear of not fitting in and being accepted by others, and so therefore not taking the risk that's required to find, you know, magic on the other side of it.
Cool.
Oh, and I'm afraid of clowns too.
You're afraid of clowns?
Not really, but.
Do you have a vision board?
God, what timing on that one? I was invited to an event last night to do a vision board through a friend of mine that unfortunately I didn't make it, and I didn't do it. And so to answer your question, I do not have one currently, but I did them in the past. And how timely to ask that, you know. So whereas I don't have a vision board, I do have a process of vision. I'm big on that to begin with. Okay. I kind of have I'll tell you what I do have currently is I have what I call a focus 5, and I have 5 areas in my life that are kind of my mantra, and you might call it a vision board, but it's almost like an emotional, personal kind of connection of ethos of what that is. nobody wants to hear what my 5 are, but I'll kind of share a couple. Like one of them for me is at my kind of personal connection with kind of higher self, right? What I would call the non-physical. That's really, I think, the foundation of everything. The more I'm connected to that source energy.
Spiritual side.
Yeah. And a lot of people want to put labels on those kinds of things. Whatever, call it what you want. But for me, it is that I like to describe myself as non-physical energy, having a physical experience in this meat suit, and again, that's part of dissolving the ego around that as well, too, is that I'm while I walk around in this vehicle, in this body, hopefully I'm a hell of a lot more than what that is. And so, so to me, that's kind of like one of those things. I wake up in the morning, like in that kind of awake space is my favorite time of the day. And I sit there because I'm connected to subconscious at that time, right? As closely as possible in that theta brainwave, coming out of sleep. And I like to kind of think about those things I want to manifest. And how I start is around that core of like, what are kind of my 5 pillars of my foundation? And it's like that non-physical, connection, right? Am I staying connected to that? A role plays in that is my own personal fitness, health, and wellness. As we talked about before, I find that to be pivotal as a foundation to my ability to give, teach, be successful in my life. I get into other things, relationships, being love, and of course I have financial goals and those kinds of things as well. So I really stick around kind of that. But I think vision boards are, you got to kind of see it and feel it.
Remind yourself repeatedly.
Yeah.
Are you a reader or a YouTube surf?
Easy answer.
Which one?
So I would define myself as you paid me a very sweet compliment saying that I was smart or intelligent or whatever. What I would describe myself as is intellectually curious. I love to learn about things. One of my passions that I've been into for a while is the role of quantum physics and quantum mechanics and understanding that in kind of our reality. And I can go down the simulation.
Dr. Joe Dispenza.
I love Dr. Joe. Yeah. He's one of my favorites. And Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Dr. Greg Braden, kind of the 3 amigos. Those guys are just amazing around all of this. And, my degrees are in communications and psychology, and that's it's what I work into. What I consider wellness in my fitness, health, and wellness protocol is really that kind of integration of the psychology of personal communication. That's that inner voice, right? Why I talk about reducing inflammation and how important that is to be able to flourish and kind of, change that. What I find is how many people are walking around with a bad inner voice. They're not their friend.
That's very common.
And so getting that into that's about subconscious, right? And so kind of changing that paradigm and getting that. So I love those 3 guys. Peter Crone is a guy that I'm into right now that is just, this guy's off the charts. He calls himself the mind architect, and I think he's phenomenal.
You did mention him. I have to look him up.
Yeah. He's phenomenal. So big shout out to Peter Crone. But so to answer your question, I tend to go to YouTube, right? Ironically, you brought up the vision board. What is that? That assists people with visualization, right? And I think that's one component. I think that the ultimate is really to feel it, right? You have to feel your way into things, right? So thoughts to feelings to emotions, right? I think that's kind of that's the cycle of through what manifestation is. And so for a lot of people, being able to look at that and see that's a focusing reminder to like, I don't know, whatever. I got a Lamborghini on there or whatever somebody's got, and it's like, every time I see that, it reminds me, am I focused on achieving that right now, whatever my pathway is to get that. So I think that's great. I love visual as well. And because of that medium for me, YouTube, 100%.
Yeah, I'm a YouTube junkie.
I also don't want to watch anything that I see on TV these days. I have, I do work with, global enterprises in terms of in the nutraceutical world and others. And so I do have to know what's going on in the world from, countries and the economy and all those kinds of things. But I just find that so much of what's going on, if you're consuming the news and so forth is not going to be productive to me. One of the things that I like to talk about is I think most of us grew up hearing, hey, you are what you eat, right? You remember that kind of thing? And I like to expound upon that and say, we're not only what we eat, but we are what we consume, right? And so if my consumption is everything that's wrong in the world today, and I'm not saying that, to bury my head in the sand on what it is, but I think so much of the reporting that's out there is designed to, not to inform, but to, I don't know, we'll call it create drama or whatever you want to call it. And so I'm around that, but I'm very careful in that. So if what I find at night, when it's time to like, okay, cool, this is my time, man, I'm YouTube junkie. I mean, what can I learn tonight? That was, I ended up watching, as we talked about earlier, Ronnie Coleman on Joe Rogan. I was like, man, I'd rather listen to that than
watch bad news. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they say, you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with. Same thing,
That's
it's
great.
What you eat, what you watch, and who you hang around with will dictate a lot.
So be careful what's in your diet, right?
Yeah. So my last question to you, because we're going to have to definitely do like part 2 and 3 on this.
I'm down.
But
I'm down.
And I'm going to do 2 and 1.
Okay.
So do you have any rules, and what is non-negotiable for you? So it could be a mix of. So because sometimes what's not negotiable is one of your rules in life.
Wow. Rules. I don't know that I was as much say rules as I would say practices. Right?
Okay.
I mean, I guess maybe my practice is my rule that I know I can control on what that is. And I guess my rule would be, I'll tell you what my rule would be love, right? If I can come from love, that I know I'll get it right. So that's a rule I'm still kind of working on. That's been a transition for me. I'm going to show you something out of my pocket here. This isn't good for everybody else. This is a rock I carry with me.
You know what? I was just, my last interview or the one before, she's a life coach, and she actually gave me a rock, which I have on my desk. And she wrote Unstoppable. Yeah, so it's funny you carry a rock around.
So my rock says love, right? It's engraved love in there. And I carry it as kind of like a talisman reminder that's there to stay connected. Because if I function from love, I won't get it wrong.
Nah.
So if that's a rule or practice,
I
don't know what it is, right? I mean, I can't lie. I'm still human, man. I was driving here and an old pattern was triggered. I was late, unfortunately, which I never am, and I pride myself on being on time, but there were some circumstances I couldn't control. I've got a little drive to get to you here. And I remember, so I'm in the left lane trying to go fast, and there's somebody in front of me going slower than I. You can go whatever speed, but get the hell out of the left lane.
Right.
That was my old paradigm. Right. And I would get like...
road rage. I mean, it's...
hopefully not quite road rage, but certainly triggered in that. And I had to still even catch that just now, as far as wherever I am in my practice.
And that's awareness.
It's awareness.
I learned this not too long ago with Don DePani.
Yeah, Don DePani's amazing.
The way he explains awareness, I could right away when I feel something snapping,
that's right.
I catch myself and I bring myself back to
So that's ego in me, right?
Or,
so the ego in there is like, don't they know I'm late for a podcast, you know, and how important Robert is? Like, I need to be there on time, right?
So did you throw him a love rock? Or
yes, a proverbial love rock, if you will, right? I had that moment and I was like, so that's ego being triggered, right? And I was like, what? Let that shit go. And one of the ways that I'll do that is I'll tell myself, I'm like, how do I know? How do I know what they're experiencing in their life?
What's going on in their life?
Yeah. What if they just got bad
news, and they're just
catatonic.
Zombie. Yeah, they're just zombie driving down because they are hit with this news.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So I kind of take that space to go, so there. What used to, I think, irritate me and set me off is because I am focused on awareness like you is, are you not aware what you are doing, right? And so, like, how dare you not be aware? But that's me judging somebody else. So to you...
Be aware about yourself.
Yeah,
right?
So now my awareness at a deeper level on that is to say, like you said, I cast them a love rock at that point, I was like, hey, whether you're just... mindless and hell, even if you are doing it on purpose, I don't care. I got nothing but love for you.
Good, man. So for the listeners out there or the watchers on YouTube, where can we find you again?
Well, Instagram, we've got Crush One Coaching, at Crush One Coaching. My personal is Chris Thompson Fitness. I think both of those line up as well on Facebook. I know there's Crush One Coaching on Facebook, and no, I'm sorry, it's Chris Thompson Fitness on
Facebook.
On Facebook, yeah.
Yeah. So if you look into
and of course, crush1coaching.com is one of the easiest.
website, yeah, that's the best one to get a hold of you. So do you do any 30-minute free sessions or something to gauge if the client is ready, or you can work with them?
Yeah, kind of a discovery call for sure. I think that's always kind of part of their practice is and one of the things that I do is I pride myself on meeting the client wherever they are. And I think that's part of where I explained before, such a wide variety of clients, from 17-year-old, big time models, sent home from Paris because their hips got 2 inches out of line, right? I mean, it's that to helping them, it takes a different approach with somebody like that to help them get down to a 36 so they can walk in New York Fashion Week, which we actually did, this past year, to somebody who, I work with a gentleman right now, we're 3 weeks in, he retired 4 weeks ago. He's taking a whole new place of life. I work with rock stars, right? So it's meeting anybody where they are on their journey. So part of kind of a discovery call for me is to find where they are, what are your goals, and then help them understand how working together we can help them crush that goal.
Excellent. Well, to the listeners and watchers, thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Robert,
for being here and sharing. Yeah. We have to do this again some other time.
I'd love to.
And take it, part 2 and 3 of this.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. I enjoy being on the platform, and I'm making a concerted effort these days to start getting out there and kind of telling this story. So thank you for the opportunity.
Great story. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Now, before you go, if you like the topic in today's episode, please like, comment, and subscribe. Check us out on iTunes or visit realbusinesspodcast.com for more information. Thank you. Until next week, stay real.